All right, Nick, overrated or underrated, waiting to the last minute to study for the SAT?
That's tough, right? Studying for the SAT takes time. You need to prepare in advance, but sometimes you just don't have the time, right? Other things get in the way. You have school, you have work. What's going on YouTube? As you probably know, we've been doing a series on TikTok, overrated or underrated. Shout out to Gary V. Yes, we did copy it from him, not gonna lie. But it's an awesome series and we're doing it in the context of the SAT. So we're gonna be talking about different factors about the SAT, strategies, anything that you guys have mentioned in the comments of TikTok. We're going to do overrated or underrated. I'm here with Madison, who is behind the camera.
So basically, I'm going to give Nick a topic about the SAT, and he's going to give his opinion on whether it's overrated or underrated.
Now, I want you guys to know I have not reviewed any of these topics, so I have no idea what she's going to ask me about. And I'm going to be extremely honest. I apologize in advance for my frankness, but also remember, guys, this is my opinion. This is not fact. It's just how I feel about it. So let's get into it.
All right, Nick, overrated or underrated? Reading the questions before the passage.
Okay, great one. I'm going to say for that one, we have overrated, and I'll tell you why. For most students, it's very difficult to review all of the questions and then read the passage and then go back and do all of the questions. Now, for the speed readers out there and the students that have no time issues, I think that's a totally fine strategy. I have no problem recommending it, but for most students, they find it very difficult to get the test done when they're going back and forth. So I would say overrated. Bad tutors tell kids to do that across the board. That is a very common thing that bad tutors tell kids. The problem is we need to talk to each one of you individually, right? Can you finish the passage? So your tutoring, your strategy should be individualized. And I know that because I own a test prep company.
Overrated or underrated, annotating the passage?
Here's the thing about annotating the passage. The problem is most students go through the entire SAT and do not write down anything, right? They don't write down any math on the math page. They don't write out a circle when they talk about a circle. They don't write out a triangle or a square when they're mentioning a geometry problem. They don't roughly graph things with their pencil. They also don't annotate. Is it the end all be all? Is annotating going to take you from 1,000 to 1,600? Obviously not. But if it helps you get a few more questions right, I think it's a great idea. As long as you don't take too much time. Look, you can't annotate and write down everything on the test. But if you use it wisely, it can help. So I think it is underrated since most students just don't do it.
All right, Nick, overrated or underrated, bubbling in one answer at a time?
Interesting. I think I prefer to bubble in one answer at a time. Some students bubble in chunks. They like to bubble each passage or each page. I'm cool with that either. Whatever the case may be, have your own bubbling strategy that you know you're going to do. Don't change up your bubbling on the day of the test. Never bubble, right? You need to practice the bubbling. As crazy as that sounds, when you do practice tests, you should print out a Scantron and bubble it. But I think bubbling one question at a time is underrated. I think that's my favorite way to do it, but I am cool with other ways as long as you just go into the test with an idea of what you're doing. This is what I'm doing.
All right, Nick, overrated or underrated, doing the reading passages out of order?
Wow, interesting one. So here's the logic there, right? If you really struggle with one type of passage, like say you struggle with the history passage, usually passage 4, you might not want to do that one fourth. You might want to do that one last, like you go 1, 2, 3, 5, 4. Some students struggle with prose, right? So they go 2, 3, 5, 1, 4. So based on the fact that I already know this, I'm going to go underrated. It can be really helpful. You want to get the things done that you're strongest at first and leave yourself some time to do the harder things last. You don't want to start off with the hardest question because the problem is if that doesn't go well, you've set a negative tone for the rest of the exam and you've also probably messed up your time. So doing the passages out of order, doing the questions out of order, underrated to a degree.
All right, Nick, overrated or underrated, skimming the readings on the grammar section?
Interesting. Here's the deal with that. The English section is all about context, right? You have to understand how the words fit in between sentences. You have to understand for sentence movement question, how the paragraph flow works. You have to understand transitions. You have to understand vocabulary. You really need to get the context. That's the key. So to skim the passage and just skip around to different answers, totally overrated. You cannot grasp the context of the passage if you don't read it deeply. You have enough time to read it deeply. If you don't, then that's something else to consider, right? Like I said, everyone's different. We need to adapt our own testing strategy to our own skills. But for most students, I think skimming the passage is a bad idea. You should read it fully. You should try try to analyze what the underlying portions are about, and you should try to answer accordingly based on context. Overrated.
All right, Nick, overrated or underrated? Always picking the shortest answer on the grammar section.
Interesting point. In years past, that was an extremely popular strategy for the SAT. It's still a decent strategy. So I'm going to say properly rated. That is not a foolproof strategy. So you cannot do that time after time. But if you have a answer down to 2 choices and you don't know which one's right, you think both are correct, I would go with the shorter answer choice. So I say it's properly rated because I think it's overused, it's overhyped. Another symptom of bad tutoring syndrome is telling kids blanket statements that don't always apply. That's one of them. So I think properly rated.
All right, overrated or underrated using Khan Academy to prep for your test?
Wow, interesting. I think Khan Academy is great. I think Khan Academy is an amazing free resource. Is it the end all be all? Is it the only thing that you need to use? Probably not. It depends on your goals, but I think it's a great starting point. So I think Khan Academy, I would say properly rated. I think the question was using it as your entire SAT prep. I think for the entire prep, it's overrated. I don't think it covers everything. I don't think it really covers the strategy as well as it could. If you want, you can check out our strategy course. I'll put the link below. It is on sale right now, and we have a score increase guarantee. Can't get any better than that. But I think that combined with Khan Academy could be great. I think the issue with Khan Academy is the lack of strategy. Khan Academy is the beginning of someone's SAT prep. It's a great starting point. It's a great thing to use, but it's not the end all be all. So I'm being generous in saying that it's properly rated.
All right, Nick, overrated or underrated? Buying a bunch of review/prep books and working through them all.
Look, prep books can be great. I have my own prep book, so I don't think prep books as a whole are bad. I think the problem is if you're going to rely solely on prep books, you're going to struggle, right? Because prep books oftentimes scratch the surface or they have one person's interpretation. And look, you have to read it. It's not a video. It's not explanatory, right? It doesn't guide you through studying. I've done review videos on the Black Book, on Khan Academy, on Kaplan books, Ivy Global. A lot of these books are useful, but I think using books alone would be very difficult. You would need to be very, very skilled and dedicated. So I'm going to say overrated. And the reason is most of the books just don't have really great strategy in them. And that's why I developed a strategy only book. So if you have any interest in that, the link is also below.
All right, Nick, overrated or underrated? Your SAT strategy course.
I think the reason that I'm going to say underrated, and obviously I'm biased, but let's be honest, is that I think we've over delivered on the value. And that was the goal of the course, is to make the course less expensive than what you get. So you get a lot more for the dollar than you do on anything else. It's pretty much slightly more than the cost of some books. Some books are $30-40. The course right now is $59. So it's a little bit more than a book, and you're getting a lot more out of the course than you are out of a book. So I think for that reason, underrated.
All right, Nick, overrated or underrated? Getting a tutor and trying to learn all the strategies.
Look, tutoring is expensive, right? So the big drawback for tutoring is the price. So I'm going to say properly rated. A tutor can be extremely helpful. I myself tutor a bunch of students. Many of them score in the 99th percentile, go on to Ivy League schools. Many of them increase their score a lot. Look, that's all great. Like that's amazing, but it is expensive. So being frank about my own business and what I do, I'm going to say properly rated because of the cost. But the value in terms of your score is extremely high. So that is underrated. I think it's a lot better in terms of a score increase than a class, but a class is a lower price point. So there's a value there too. I think the best price point is our pre-recorded course, right? That's, less than the cost of one tutoring session, and you're getting me for 5 hours explaining things. So tutoring is properly rated. It's very expensive.
Overrated or underrated? Sending all your SAT scores to your colleges that you're applying to.
Interesting. I mean, the thing is, some colleges are going to have to send all of them. But I think if you're not required to send all of them, that's overrated. You should only send the best scores or the best super score. So it really depends on a college by college basis, but I would say overrated.
All right. Overrated or underrated? Studying vocabulary words that commonly appear on the SAT.
In years past, that was one of the most popular things to do for SAT prep. Everyone knows the term at that time, SAT vocabulary or SAT word. There are word lists, flashcards, all this stuff you had to study. Not anymore, right? There's greatly reduced vocabulary. There's greatly reduced reliance on vocabulary for the SAT in general. So I would say it's overrated. If you're trying to score at the highest level, like I'm talking 1500 plus, then you may want to review some of the commonly used words. But for most students, it's extremely overrated. It's just not necessary. But like I said, once again, anything strategy related, anything study related for the SAT depends on the person, but for most, overrated.
All right, Nick, overrated or underrated? Leaving questions blank that I don't know or picking a random answer.
Great question. I think here you don't lose any points, right, for wrong answers. So in years past, the old SAT, you would lose points for wrong answers. So they wanted to basically prevent students from randomly guessing. Now that's changed, right? There are no negative point penalties on either the SAT or the ACT. So you guess everything. If you run out of time, you fill in everything. You put down B, C, whatever you want to do. Make sure to fill everything out. So it's totally overrated in terms of leaving questions blank. It is a bad idea.
All right, Nick, overrated or underrated using the reference sheet for the math questions?
Here's the thing with that. I mean, you shouldn't have to look at the reference sheet, right? Because you should have all those things memorized. But I think it is underrated because students just never look at it. They just forget something and they're literally like, oh, I know there's a thing and I know that I should know it, but I don't. And I'm like, well, if you flip back 6 pages, you may find the answer. And they're like, oh, it's there. Oh my God. And I'm like, yeah, make sure you know that it's there. But the thing is, you should have all these things memorized. So I think it's properly rated. Using it is properly rated. It's not underrated because you should have it memorized.
All right, Nick, overrated or underrated waiting to the last minute to study for the SAT?
That's tough, right? Studying for the SAT takes time. You need to prepare in advance, but sometimes you just don't have the time, right? Other things get in the way. You have school, you have work, whatever the case may be. It's hard to prepare for the test in a short amount of time. So I would say it's overrated in terms of cramming. But if you need to cram, I have the perfect course for you. Check it out. The link is below. All right, guys, thank you. Comment below any other things you want me to give you overrated or underrated on. Comment below, guys. Let me know anything you want my opinion on, overrated or underrated related to SAT, ACT, the college process. I will be responding to the comments below. So put your overrated or underrated below and let me know what you think. Do you think I'm right? Am I correct or am I totally off base? Give me a shout. Let me know if you think I am overrated or underrated, which would be amazing. Hopefully I'm underrated. Talk to you guys soon.